Okay. Hello, everybody. I'm not sure if people can hear me, but I am. I think I'm live, or at least I hope I'm live. If there's anybody out there who's tuned in, you just leave a comment. That would be great. And I can see you. Okay. Thank you, Karen Hardy. Um, Thanks so much, everyone, for joining me. This is my second Friday in a row doing a webinar at this time. And today we're going to talk a little bit about chargebacks. If you missed gosh, my hair's a mess. If you missed the presentation last week, it is available on this Facebook page, but it's also available on my YouTube channel. And so feel free to check that out if you'd like to see what we did last week. That was related to the importance of having a customized terms and conditions document. And we are going to get right into it. So let me share the right window. And I don't think I'm having a technical problem this time the way I was before. So let's get it going. Today we're going to be talking about chargebacks, how to avoid them, and how to deal with them. That is the information about how to find me if you need to find me. We'll be taking questions and answers. We'll be taking questions, and I'll be giving answers at the end of the presentation. So feel free to type those into the chat if you need to. I'll take a look at them after I'm done. A couple of things to get out of the way. Professional responsibility obligations. This could be viewed as attorney advertising. It's for informational purposes only. I am not intending to provide specific legal advice. I do not represent you just by virtue of the fact that you're in this presentation, unless we have an agreement in place where I'm representing you. And I saw a couple of friendly names in the chat already, so nice to see you all. And prior outcomes don't guarantee future results. I updated this slide from the last time. I've been practicing law for a while. This is just a little bit about me, which you don't really need to know. So this is a slide that makes it into almost every presentation that I do. It's a little bit different here. Travel is a high-risk industry, and chargebacks are a big part of that risk. So we want to talk about some of the ways to deal with chargebacks. We're going to talk about all of these things. I think it's important to have a well-crafted terms document, have a solid workflow, use a good tech tool, following best practices. We'll talk about that a little bit. And something that I think gets overlooked a lot is sticking within your preferred supplier network. And I want to I don't think I have another slide on this, so I just want to take a minute to talk about this. If you have, if you're with a host agency, your host agency is probably encouraging you to book within their preferred supplier network whenever possible. And there's a reason that they're doing that. The reason they're doing that is because those are the companies that support your host agency, your network. And they have relationships there where if there is something that goes sideways, and you can kind of trade on goodwill and rely on that relationship to try to come up with a solution. So just keep that in the back of your mind if you're hosted. If you're not hosted, if you're independent, not a bad idea to try to cultivate a preferred supplier network where you're developing relationships with your BDM and your suppliers that you book most frequently. So keep that in mind. Okay, so here's why chargebacks are a problem. If you are using your client's credit card to make a payment with a supplier, you are responsible for the security of that payment information. Your client is giving you their credit card number. That number can be used to commit all sorts of fraud, which is a problem. But most importantly, to your bottom line is if a client reverses a charge, it's entirely possible that the amount of that disputed charge could come out of your pocket. And I just want to give an example of something that happened to a client of mine. The travel agent booked a client for the agent's best friend, for his best friend. and the client was up against a final payment deadline. The client said to his best friend, who is also his travel advisor, "You've got my credit card. Just go ahead and put that final payment through." The credit card uh, payment went through with the supplier. The client took the trip. The client had a miserable time and was really angry about it. And the client, after the trip, after he took the trip, calls back and says to his best friend, who's also his travel advisor, "That trip was horrible. I shouldn't have to pay for it. And I'm going to get my money back from my credit card company." The travel advisor begged his best friend, "Please don't do that. There are scenarios where I could wind up having to pay for that." And the best friend did it anyway. And the travel advisor was on the hook for about $15,000 of his client's vacation, which his client actually took, because, among other things, he didn't have a credit card authorization. So this actually happens, where travel advisors have to pay for vacations, in some cases, even a vacation that the client actually took, it's no joke. So this is how it impacts you. The client tells their credit card company or their bank that they want to dispute a charge. I think a lot of times the client thinks that they're getting their money back from the credit card company. They think that it's some sort of um, satisfaction guarantee or something like that. I don't think they realize that what they're really telling the bank is that it's a fraudulent charge. And if it's a fraudulent charge and you're the person who put the payment through with the bank, it's sort of like your client is accusing you of credit card fraud. So that's why it's important to have some best practices in place. So here are two different kinds of scenarios. If you are the type of advisor who takes direct payments, and maybe you're taking net rates and you're marking them up, this is the potential scenario. You take a net rate, you mark that rate up, you run a charge on their card that goes into your bank account, and then you pay the supplier the net rate and keep the profit. Now, I'll just say right away, this is extraordinarily risky to do it this way. There's a lot more risk to doing it this way than there is to taking a commissionable rate, which is the alternative. Most host agencies prohibit their advisors from taking net rates because of a situation like I'm about to describe. But if you're doing this, you're already in risky territory. But if the client challenges the charge, then you're going to be in a fight with the credit card company to get the money to get the money that they were intending to pay you. And then if the supplier is not giving you a refund, basically you have paid the supplier out of your own pocket for something that's non-refundable, and you're in a position where the credit card company is not actually going to put that money for that charge in your bank account. So that's a risk. If you book commissionable rates, it plays out a little bit differently. So instead of running a charge on your client's card, you're using your client's payment information to pay the supplier directly. Then the client challenges the card, challenges the charge, essentially accusing you of credit card fraud. And then the supplier is going to come to you and say, "Prove to us that you had authorization to run that charge." Now, if you've got a credit card authorization that you can send to the supplier, then it's up to them to fight with the credit card company about whether or not the chargeback should be upheld. Um, but the supplier is probably also going to ask you to reach out to your client to try to talk them out of um, moving forward with the credit card charge. The reason they're doing that is because, um, keep in mind, with both of these scenarios, the credit card company, their client is the cardholder. And so they don't really have any particular interest in bending over backwards to make sure that client, their cardholder, has to pay for these things if the cardholder is saying, "I don't want to pay for those things." So the deck is already kind of stacked against you. And then if the supplier loses the dispute with the credit card company, which is likely because of what I was just saying, the loyalty there is with the credit card company's loyalty is to the cardholder, not to the supplier. So if they lose, then the supplier may come after you to recover the amount of the disputed charge. And they could either that could happen in a couple of different ways. I've heard I've heard that it's happened. I've never had to deal with this, but I've heard that in some cases, if you are a hosted agency and and they are recovering the amount of a disputed charge from your host agency, that could impact the future commissions of everybody else in your host agency that's booking with that supplier. So I've heard that that's happened. Like I said, never happened to one of my clients, but it's a thing. So, okay. So here are the ways that you can protect yourself. The first is by with your terms and conditions document. Last week we talked about terms and conditions, how important they are. Just a little recap of that. This is a legal document between you and the clients. It's a document that governs the relationship between you and your clients when you're booking travel for them. Because it's contractual in nature, you need your clients to affirmatively agree to your terms and conditions. And this was the whole thrust of what I was talking about last week. Having a custom terms and conditions document is preferable to having a cookie cutter template or a form that you've purchased or subscribed to. And the reason for that is that every business is a little bit different, not only in the types of trips that you book, but also the way you're set up and the way you're working with your clients. So it's best not to use something that was drafted in a generic way or drafted for somebody else. In the terms and conditions document, when I draft them, there are some provisions that are particularly relevant to resolving chargeback disputes. The first is you want your clients to take responsibility for their payments. There's a section in there when I draft it that if you are making payments with the supplier, you're going to want language in there that makes it clear that the supplier sets the payment schedule, the supplier sets the terms, and also the second part here is that the client is agreeing that they understand that there are cancellation and refund policies. Now, if here's another reason why it's better to have something custom. If you are charging a cancellation penalty in addition to your supplier, in other words, if you've got to cancel a service fee for cancellations, for administering the cancellation of a booking, you're going to want to specify that in your terms and conditions, but also you're going to want to make it clear that the client is agreeing through your terms and conditions that they understand the cancellation and refund policy of the supplier. So that's important, and you'll see a little bit later when we get to credit card authorizations why that's the case. And then this is the language that I think is really key. You can put a provision in your terms and conditions document that says that your clients won't do a chargeback, with some exceptions. So in that language, you want something that says that the clients are agreeing that they won't dispute the charge, and that if they do dispute the charge, that you can go to court, show your terms and conditions to a judge, explain to the court, Your Honor, this was not a fraudulent charge. I had authorization from my client. I was damaged to the tune of $15,000 plus attorney's fees, court costs, etc. And the exception there is cases of fraud. Clients have the right legally to dispute a fraudulent charge. You can't stop them from doing that. But if they've authorized the charge, they can agree in your terms and conditions that they're not going to try to reverse those charges. I want to talk a little bit about that right the client has. There's a law called the Fair Credit Billing Act, which gives consumers protection against unfair billing practices by credit card companies and unauthorized charges. So unauthorized charges, charges with an incorrect date or an incorrect amount, incorrectly calculated charges, those are all things that are covered by the Fair Credit Billing Act. And under this law, consumers have 60 days from the time that they get their credit card bill to dispute a fraudulent charge with the card issuer, or this also applies to certain other types of loans. The charge has to be at least $50 in order for them to file a dispute under the Fair Credit Billing Act. Complaints have to be filed in writing, but going back to the thing that I was saying earlier about the credit card companies have loyalty to their cardholders over and above loyalty to merchants. There are lots of credit card companies that will be more than happy to allow a dispute after the 60-day window. and they also might waive the writing requirement. So the law gives consumers a certain rights, um, to be protected from unfair lending practices, unfair practices by their credit card company. But just keep in mind that the credit card company might be more than happy to be more generous than the law requires when dealing with their own cardholders. It is absolutely critical that you have credit card authorization, and furthermore, that you get an authorization for each and every charge. And I know people argue with me about this all the time, but if you find yourself in a situation where you have a chargeback, you're going to need to have a credit card authorization that you can show the supplier or that you can show the credit card company if it's a case where you're taking net rates. So, in the case that I was talking about earlier, where the guy's best friend took the vacation and then did a chargeback, he took the credit card number over the phone. He did not have a credit card authorization. So you need to have a credit card authorization, and you need to get one for every transaction that you process. It should have the date of the authorization. It should say the amount that's being authorized, and it should identify what it is that they're paying for. Um, do not take numbers by email or text, and avoid taking it over the phone. There are people who do take numbers over the phone. Um, if you do that, you're going to need to follow up with some sort of paper trail. That's send them I don't know, send them an email and say, just want to be clear that you're authorizing me to charge your card in this amount, and everything that's compliant. Um, but I recommend strongly that you don't just let people say, charge my card that you've got on file. And most importantly, because data breaches are really expensive to correct, you don't want to store your client's credit card numbers in a way that's not secure and encrypted. So if you've got a file with credit card authorizations that are wet ink on paper in your office, that you should shred all of those and move to an encrypted, secure system. If you have an Excel spreadsheet with all of those numbers that is stored in the cloud, that is a huge problem if it's not encrypted and completely secure. So be very careful about that. Um, so here's what the standard is for how credit card companies resolve chargeback disputes. During the pandemic, this changed a little bit. There's a new thing that's there. But in order for you to win a chargeback dispute, this is what you're going to have to show the bank, or what the supplier is going to have to show the bank. They're going to need to show the credit card company that the client agreed to terms and conditions. So if you don't have terms and conditions, you're already hosed. The You're also going to need to show that the terms and conditions included a cancellation and refund policy. So that's the middle circle of the slide that I had with the three things. You need to have terms and conditions that includes that cancellation and refund policy. And this is the new thing. You're now going to need to show that the client agreed to the terms and conditions at the time they made the charge, and that the cancellation and refund policy was brought to the client's attention at the time the charge was authorized. So now here's a freebie. I'm going to give you some language. This is language that you could use for a credit card authorization that hopefully would work, where they check a box on the credit card authorization before they sign it and submit it to you. I am authorizing the agency to charge my card. You could do it, charge my card referenced above, or charge my card ending in 4567, in the amount indicated on the invoice, or in the amount of $1,234.56. And I agree to the agency's terms and conditions of booking, including the suppliers and agency's cancellation and refund policies, which are located at this link. And then you link to where they can find your terms and conditions. So that's language that you can use or adapt. I mean, you can put depending on how your credit card authorizations are set up, but you're going to want to get this for each and every charge. And it's important because if you don't get this, if you don't have terms and conditions, if your terms and conditions don't have a cancellation and refund policy, and if you're not calling those policies to the attention of the cardholder at the time that they're authorizing the charge, there's a pretty good likelihood that you're going to lose that chargeback dispute, or that your supplier is not going to be able to defend it adequately. Um, so really important, really important. I know it can be a pain sometimes to get credit card authorizations, but there are lots of tech tools out there that are secure, that are encrypted, that are your friend. Travefy, TravelJoy have these authorizations. I believe Tess also has them. Those are Vacation Creation, Vacation CRM. They have tech tools where your credit card numbers are encrypted. Those are all specific to the travel industry. Other things might not be encrypted. So, like if you're using a Google form or something like that, you might not be in very good shape. But you also want a tech tool that's going to allow you to make sure that you've got the ability to specifically include that magic language that was on the previous slide when they're authorizing it. So if you've got a tech tool that doesn't let you change what the credit card authorization language is, you might want to think about scrapping that and going to something that gives you the ability to customize it. And you're going to need to have a record of when those authorizations are made, so that if your client does a chargeback and the supplier knocks on your door to say, or calls you up or emails you to say, prove to us you had authorization for this charge, you can print that out, send it to them easily, because you've got it in your system, and you're holding on to that. So just about done here. Just key takeaways here: have a terms and conditions document that has the right protections for your business. Get a credit card authorization for each and every charge. Make sure you're using the language that's actually going to protect you, and make technology your friend. Use a good tech tool that's going to keep records of authorizations and that will transmit payment information to securely, so that you're not sitting on a potential data breach. So again, that's where you can find me if you need to talk to me. And I'm going to go back to my go back to the chat and look and see what I've got here. Scrolling down all of you're live and I can hear you. Good afternoon. Okay. So, somebody said that they lost me. I hope you didn't lose me. Okay. So I'm going to take some of these questions. What if a client authorizes or requests a payment via text or email? So Marilyn, I think that's a real problem, because if they're authorizing a payment via text, you're probably not going to have that magic language that's going to protect you in case of a chargeback. If they're transmitting the credit card number to you in an unsecure format, that's going to be a potential data breach. So I would not recommend doing that. Lynn, so for those of you who use tests for terms and conditions, is the client, quote, acknowledging that the above information is correct enough? Yeah, so this is something that I've heard from other people who use tests. I know there are a couple of host agencies out there that provide access to tests free of charge as a CRM. The problem is that when there's a checkbox the language that's attached to the checkbox says something like, I acknowledge that the above information is correct. And that's not always what you need them to be doing when they check that box. You don't want them to acknowledge that your terms and conditions are correct or that the invoice is correct. You need them to acknowledge that they're paying the invoice, or you need them to acknowledge that they are agreeing to your terms and conditions. And I know they don't offer another option. There are I know that there are some of my clients who figured out a workaround for this, but I'm not really all that familiar with tests, so I don't really know how that's set up, or how they've done that. But I think outside agents and KHM are the two big host agencies that provide tests to their clients. And so you might go to your host agency's Facebook group. Um, I've got lots of clients who've worked with me on their terms and conditions documents, and somebody there might have come up with a workaround. And if you ask in that group, they might be able to show you something. But if I'm representing you and I've done your terms, and you want to send it to me like I'm a client of yours, like I'm booking a trip with you, I'm happy to look at it to see, if I've got any feedback. But I'm not, I'm only familiar with the technologies that I use in my travel business. Um, there's that. Um, what counts as an authorization? So I think we covered this. Can a client agree via email? I think there's a way there would be a way to do it, but I think to have them agree by email, but I think it would be super, super clunky. And the real thing the thing that people don't like about having to send an authorization for each and every charge is that they feel like it's cumbersome for the client. And I think what's more cumbersome is not having a tech tool that'll let them authorize it with just two little clicks. If you have to send them an email that says, please reply to this email that you agree to authorize me to charge your card ending in 4567 in the amount on this invoice, comma, and that you agree to my terms and conditions of booking, which are at this link, which include cancellation and refund. Like, that's a long email. And then what if they don't send it to you, or what if they don't type in all those words? Or it just feels to me like it's really clunky. That's why I say, a tech tool is your friend. April, yes, I think this is a great idea. If you send them an invoice and a secure encrypted payment link to authorize, which is, I think, the way like TravelJoy, Travify, some of the other CRM systems that are specific to the travel industry, you can send an invoice. They can enter in their card number, transmit it to you securely, and then you use the card number to pay the supplier, and then you've got um, a record of the charge that was authorized. Um, so so that's there. Hey Lana, how are you? Nice to see you. I rattled off some of those things. Tests, like I said, I don't think it's there might be some workarounds for tests, but I know Test is secure. TravelJoy, Travify, those are all pretty secure. Vacation CRM, Vacation Creation, those are all pretty good. Can you record on the phone? So if you have it in your terms and conditions that all calls are recorded, there are different states have different requirements, right? So in some cases, you're going to need if you're in a two-party consent state, you actually need them to affirmatively give permission, and it might not be enough to have it in your terms and conditions that your calls are all recorded, especially if you're doing an intake call with a new client and they haven't necessarily agreed to your terms and conditions. Remember, you need your clients to affirmatively agree to your terms and conditions. So recording a phone call, I guess if you've got a recorded phone call where they have agreed to your terms, they have agreed to specifically to the cancellation and refund policy, they've agreed to the amount, they've agreed to the thing, and that it's dated. Again, I think it's just a little more clunky to take it over the phone if you're going to try to get everything that you trying to get everything that you need to have in there to actually protect yourself. So let's see what else we've got here. So if the client uses a payment link that the supplier provides you, that's actually great, I think, because then the transaction is clearly between the supplier and the cardholder. You aren't holding your client's payment information; you're not handling it, And so it really, the responsibility there um, falls to the supplier to have credit card language, authorization language that's going to be sufficient. So I actually really like working with suppliers who do that. So um, and then uh, and then Gina's asking pretty much the same question there, so that's great. Let's see here, Raylene. Um, Initial having verbiage on the initial deposit credit card authorization that the balance due will automatically be charged to. So I'm not a huge fan of this, but there are exceptions, which if you've got a corporate client and you're doing corporate work, you're probably not going to be getting a credit card authorization for each and every charge, but you're also probably going to have a contract with the company that will talk about how they make requests, where the payment is. Maybe you're billing them monthly. So for corporate accounts, I think it might be a little bit different, but just keep in mind what the supplier is going to want. I think if you've got a blanket authorization that says that all of these payments are due and will automatically be charged to the card that you have on file, it's really just a question of whether or not the credit card company is going to accept that. And looking at their standard, where they're taking the position that the credit card companies are taking the position that the client has to agree to the specifics, the specific charge, and that there were terms and conditions that were agreed to, and that the terms and conditions have a cancellation and refund policy, and that you caused and that you had you called attention to the cancellation and refund policies at the time that you made the charge. I mean, I think there are enough things in there, and just keep in mind that the thing about the credit card company is not particularly going to be in any great hurry to um, to protect you, right? So they're potentially going to be looking for reasons to allow the chargeback to go through because they want to coddle the cardholder who's their client. So I would just say, if that's the way you have to do it, I guess it's the way you have to do it. But I don't. I would look for a different solution that's going to get them to agree to each charge, and find a tech tool that's your friend, because there are going to be fewer ways that the credit card company can kick it back to you if you're following those steps that they have. Um, uh, do we know how to edit the? I am not. I should have realized that I don't have a good answer to this question before I put it on the screen. Do we know how to edit the acknowledgement to include the new TC and cancellation policy on Travefy? I don't use Travefy for credit card authorization, so I'm not really familiar with that technology. I know, however, because I think the people at Travefy are terrific. Shout out to them. I know that it's possible to do it. I just don't use it in my travel agency. So for that purpose, I use Travel Joy for that. So maybe I'll change at some point. But you might want to talk to Travefy about it to see how you can edit that. How you can edit that language. If we have cancel fees, do they need to be listed on our website? Not necessarily, but your clients do need to agree to them. So, what I recommend doing, I don't recommend putting the specifics of your fee structure, including cancellation fees, in your terms and conditions document, because you might want to charge different fees to different clients. You might want to waive a cancellation fee because of extenuating circumstances. So I recommend putting the cancellation fees in your client agreement, which is sort of, the way I think of it is, and I think I covered this last week if you want to go back and look at that video. But the idea is, if you want to charge different fees to different clients, or if you want to waive a fee from time to time, you're not kind of poking a hole in your terms and conditions. If your fees live in a client agreement, that's an agreement specifically between you and that client, whereas your terms and conditions are going to be the boilerplate for everything you do. So I don't know if that makes sense, but that's kind of how I think about it. Let's see here. Uh, uh, if one person is paying for a group cruise, can you combine the payments as one? $700 deposit, which is 100 per person, or would you do a separate agreement for each cabin? I think it's fine if they're making one payment and it's on one card, as long as you've got authorization that matches what's being charged, that the date is what's being charged, and you've followed that other kind of quote unquote magic language. I think you're okay to take one charge. I don't think that's a problem. Um, can I put the slide back up for the credit card authorization? Yeah, Mike, you might want to change it because I hope you're doing well. But let me go back to that slide. Hang on a second here. And you can take a screenshot of that. Oops. Yeah, this is probably what you're going to want to be using. So I'll just leave that up there for a while, and I'll also hide your comments so that people can see the whole thing. Okay, let's see here. So I'm just going to read the next one while people jot that down. But yeah, this might be new information for you somehow because this is a relatively recent development. So the new credit card standard, this is language that you can work. You might need to adapt it, but Tracy is saying, I collect credit card information during deposit and then find it so easy to send a reminder email about the card being charged for final payment, so you're not tracking them down for that. Would I need them to authorize final payment as well in some way? So let me just put this up because this is a lot, a more substantive question. So if you're getting one authorization at the front end of the booking process where you're saying to them, I'm authorizing you to charge my card in the amount of this deposit, and final payment will be due on this date, and I understand that my card will be charged automatically, and I'm agreeing to the cancellation and refund policy and the terms and conditions of this link, blah, blah, blah. I think if you're getting all of that magic language and the dates match up and the amounts match up, and that they've authorized it all at once, I think that's probably okay. But again, I'm not the decision maker. It's a question of whether or not the credit card company will accept that. So I err on the side of using the automation feature in my CRM so that the client gets a payment reminder 5 days before, and then it's their responsibility to go in and click the link and agree to it that way. So, okay, let's go here. Bernadette, you're sending an authorization that here, I'm just going to go back to, I'm going to stop sharing actually. So you send a credit card authorization form with an estimated price. So I would, I don't think an estimated price is probably going to be. I would rather do it by the letter. So I have had a situation happen, and this is how I've done it in my travel business, where I've had a a price has changed after I got the authorization, and I have followed up with an email. If it's like $20 more, I'll take the authorization, and sometimes rather than redoing the invoice and sending it, I'll follow that up with an email thread so that I can say, hey, in between when I sent you the invoice and when I was putting the payment through, the price went up by $3.56. Can you reply to this email that you're still authorizing me to charge the amount? And then at least I've got a paper trail that I can show that if the numbers don't match up, that it was still authorized. even though it changed. Um, and then let's see here. Helen. How are you, Helen? Credit card authorization says the name of the supplier that will be charging the card, not my agency name. Should you change that? No, I think that's good. That you're authorizing. You might want to tweak that language that I put up earlier to have it say, we'll charge the principal supply. I'm authorizing you to use my card to pay the principal supplier, depending on how you're doing it. But again, tweaking that language is not necessarily a problem, as long as you are getting them to agree to your terms and conditions, as long as you have terms and conditions, and as long as they're specifically agreeing to cancellation and refund policy, and you're calling that to their attention. So, how much of a charge am I willing to swallow if there's a chargeback? If it's more than that, I do a credit card authorization. Well, I mean, that's one way to approach it, but I'm kind of a Boy Scout about this stuff, so I don't really view it that way. But if you can absorb the cost of a chargeback, maybe it's fairly low risk. But there's another piece of this too, which is that you're also handling your client's credit card information, and if you're misusing the credit card information, or if you're subjecting yourself to a potential claim that you're misusing that information, that's a problem for reasons completely different than just the fact that you are willing to absorb the loss. Because when you're handling clients' identifying personal information, um, and you go ahead and put the charge through, and then it turns out that the charge was not for $55, and instead it was, the supplier put it through for $5,555. Are you okay to absorb that if you don't have an authorization? Or I've had suppliers make mistakes sometimes, right? And we all make mistakes. So your errors and omissions policy, check with them to see if they would cover you for something like that. But there really are problems sometimes when you are handling their credit card numbers and somebody else makes a mistake, and then you have to be the one to clean it up. I've had suppliers that put a final payment through on my client's credit card, did not have authorization to do that. I had a supplier once who charged my client's card multiple times for the same transaction. Huge problem. And because I was the one who gave them that credit card number, I'm implicated in that. So I just think the more you can get it locked down, have a really solid workflow so that it's easy for you to get the credit card authorization each and every time. I think that's probably a best practice. So, okay. I'm just I don't see any more questions, but I'm gonna just vamp for a minute just to see if there's anything else. Okay, here we go. Um, uh, Julianne, so this is a good question. So the CVC info disappears after a certain amount of time in TravelJoy. How to save that info safely without having to ask the client each time they authorize a payment? The quick answer is you should not be saving that information, because the reason that you are out of compliance is if you store the CVC information. Basically, in order to be PCI compliant, you can't store the CVC info with the credit card number. And the thing that TravelJoy does is, it's secure and it's encrypted, and then after a month or two, the amount, the CVC, the magic code, the three digit code or 4 digits if it's Amex, that disappears from the record, or it's blocked. And then the client, when the next time you send the client an invoice, then they can authorize it, and it puts the CVC code back in there. So I would do it the way TravelJoy does it. I would not pull the CVC info out after it's already disappeared, because if you're getting a current authorization for each and every charge, TravelJoy is going to collect that information securely and encrypted every time they do that. So Um, so do it the way TravelJoy does it. Send them an invoice for the next payment, and if the CVC info is no longer current, TravelJoy will ask them to reauthorize it. You'll have the authorization in TravelJoy, and you should be okay. Um, uh, do I have a favorite CRM for legal issues? I I have what I like using, but different. The answer is going to be different for different people. Different. I use TravelJoy. I think Travify is really great. Like I said, I like Vacation Creation. I know those people and they're fantastic. Vacation CRM I think is very good. I mean, there are lots of tools out there. It's really just going to be the favorite one for you is going to be the one that's easiest for you to use and use consistently. So take advantage of a free trial, or a discount code. Try something out and see if it's easier for you to use, because it's not going to be worthwhile to spend your money on a technology that you don't use. Right? You want to make it easy for you to use, that you can learn it, that you can to be good with it. So. Um, uh, yes, if you've got terms and conditions that you're using now, I do complimentary consultations. I'm more than happy to take a look at what you've got and give you my thoughts. You can email me tcarpenter@carpentertaylor.com, and just send me a copy of your terms, and I can send you a link to schedule a complimentary consult with me. Or I'm traveling quite a bit this summer, so it might be a little while before we can get to it, but happy to look at it. Um, uh, should we have language for the client when charging planning fees? Yes, if you're charging a planning fee, you should have a credit card authorization when you do that. If they're paying with a credit card, and you can use that same language. I authorize you to charge my card. That should work. Let's see here. What do you recommend for those of us who do FITs and have several suppliers in the mix? Yeah, so if you're running payments with different suppliers for the same trip, um, I think the invoicing functions on some of the CRMs are going to be really good, because you can line up the payments. This is the payment for your cruise. This is when deposits due. This is when final payments due. Here's the payment for the pre-hotel night. Here's the payment for your airfare. Here's the payment for third-party shore excursions. Here's the payment for insurance. You can build an invoice that has the itemized amounts of each of those charges, and then the client can just click authorize, 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 and then you get authorizations that all of those things have been authorized. They're itemized, and you can do it on one invoice, as long as it's broken out that way. Because keep in mind, if there's a dispute, what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to show it to the supplier to show that you had authorization to charge their card in that amount on that date, and that they agreed to your terms and conditions, and that the terms and conditions contain a reference to the supplier's cancellation and refund policy. So as long as you're doing all of that, you can combine them all in one invoice, but then have a breakdown. Um, it's another reason why, going back to that slide about the difference between taking net rates and booking commissionable rates, the same thing happens if you're kind of bundling things together and charging one price for it. If you're doing that through a wholesaler where you can get air, hotel, and transfers and everything else bundled up in a package, that's great. I get why people want to do that, because they don't want people shopping around for. I mean, clients think that we book travel the same way they do. They think that we search ourselves to death on the internet, find the lowest price for everything, and then buy the cheapest here, there, and the other place. That's not how we do it. We work with wholesalers who have confidential wholesale and market rates. Sometimes we're not even allowed to give a breakdown. But if you've booked an FIT that has multiple components, it's kind of unavoidable. You're going to have to, if you're going to be making those payments with suppliers, they're going to see 7 different charges on their card anyway. So just line it up on an invoice, make it easy for your clients, so that they've got it all on one place. Um, Uh, and so Julianne's just asking again about if you're making direct bookings with a hotel and the CVC has to be entered, you need to have that on hand. And yes, you're correct, but you're also going to be able to get that in TravelJoy because you're going to send them an invoice where they're going to approve it, and in order to approve it, they have to put it in their CVC, and that will refresh it for you so that you'll have it there. Um, Stephanie, if you have a client who's not tech savvy, doesn't do things online, how do you get them to authorize a payment or terms and conditions? Um, that's a good question. You can have them fill out a credit card authorization form. Wet ink on paper, scan that, and send it back to you. If it's a photograph or a photocopy of the terms and conditions document, then a photocopy or if it's a JPEG of a credit card authorization, it's a little bit harder to skim the data off of that piece of paper. But truthfully, I decline to work with those people because generally speaking, the fact that they don't know how to click a button on a form that I email them, that's usually the least of the problem that I have with a client like that. Usually everything else with their trip is going to be a huge ordeal, and I just choose not to take that on. But you could do it old school. You could have them come into your office and show you the credit card company, and you could record the conversation. You could do other things, I guess, but it just seems like that's a lot of work for somebody who is probably going to be a difficult client, in my opinion. Include photo ID with a credit card authorization. Linda's asking. Um, uh, I don't know that that does a whole lot if you've got a signed authorization through. It, it doesn't. It doesn't. I don't know that it adds a whole lot, but it also then you've got a copy of your client's driver's license, which if you're not handling that, if you're not handling your client's driver's license in a secure encrypted format, then you've got something else that could be used for identity theft. And so you're just taking information from them that maybe you don't need, that could potentially be misused, and then you're stuck with that. So I see what Teresa's saying here. Let me just show this one again. So Teresa's saying that she splits the component up, but there's not a link to each individual supplier terms and conditions. So in your terms and conditions, hopefully you've got a provision that says that your clients are automatically agreeing to the principal supplier's terms and conditions, no matter who those suppliers are. So you have a legal and this, we talked about this a little, I think we talked about this yesterday. You have a legal obligation to disclose the identity of your suppliers. You should not be hiding or masking who those suppliers are. And so if they've agreed to your terms and conditions, and your terms and conditions say they're also agreeing to the supplier's terms and conditions, then you can and you've identified who those suppliers are. I think there's a court case out there that actually you don't have to actually get them to separately agree to each supplier's terms and conditions. You just have to have them agree to your terms and conditions that incorporate the supplier's terms and the cancellation and refund policy. So, excuse me. So, if I've done your terms and conditions, you're good to go on that. I'm pretty comfortable about that, but take a look. So yeah, I remember I did yours, Teresa. Thank you. But you're good. You're good. And it's nice to see you, by the way. Okay. Anything else? Anything else? All right. We're coming up on a little less than an hour. So anything else that you need that I can be helpful with, feel free to send me an email. I'm thinking about doing another one of these next Friday if I can clear my schedule. And I'm thinking about doing one on independent contractor agreements because because lots of people are super busy and they're bringing on independent contractors, and I have seen some things out there that I think are kind of risky. So maybe we can talk about that. But and I'm doing a couple webinars for other people about that same topic as well. Um, and just going back to Camille, let me just show this. One last one. Yes. So if you've got language in there that calls their attention to the cancellation and refund policies, and they're checking that box, whether they go to your website and read the terms and conditions, that's their responsibility. But if they checked a box that they agree to it, then you should be good to go. Okay. So feel free to this is going to be on the YouTube channel going forward. The recording will also live on my Facebook page for my law practice. But if anybody has suggestions for a future webinar that I can do on a Friday afternoon, I'm more than happy to take those into account, and we'll take it from there. All right. Thanks, everyone. It was great to see you all, and more to come. Bye.